This is an interview by Linda Jackson on the 18th of July with Mr. Edward Dakin at the Museum of Wigan Life. So can you start by giving us your full name, place and date of birth?
Yeah, Edward Dakin. I live at 112 Gidlow Lane, Wigan.
Where were you born?
Marrier Lane, Wigan. That was off Walgate, you know, it was in the slum area really.
It's very close, isn't it?
Yeah.
And can I ask you, when were you born?
23rd of the 3rd, 1931. 23rd of March, 1931.
Okay, and do you know anyone in your family who served in the First World War?
Yes, my father served in the Thomas Dakin in the First World War.
And do you know his date and place of birth?
Yes, he was born at the boatman's cottage at Spencer's Bridge, Newborough, and he was born on the 24th of March, 1899.
Thank you. And do you know about his family history? So do you know who his parents, the names of his parents?
His parents were Richard and Margaret Dakin, who worked on the canals, the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. That was their form of work, you know, the type of work.
And what work did they do?
They were boaters and they used to transport various things along the canal until, of course, the speedier transport came along with roads and rail. So the canals really fell in decline. So they moved on to Wigan. So.
Thank you. And can you tell me a bit about your dad? Do you know when he enlisted?
Yes, he enlisted.
Go ahead.
He enlisted on the 10th of May 1917.
Okay, and do you know where he who did he enlist with? Which regiment?
He enlisted in the Welsh Fusiliers.
Okay, and do you know what happened to him during the war? What his experiences were like?
Well, they went to France. Obviously, they were taken up to the front line in buses and in London buses, and they were given the task of taking over a wood which was held by German soldiers near the village of Estiers.
Okay.
And then obviously the Germans were had heavy artillery, and the British army had literally nothing. The British troops at that particular site had literally nothing. So it was a hell of a job taking it, you know what I mean? So basically, the first of it started, you had to take cover, and then some of the soldiers threw down their arms and made a run for it until the officer pulled out his revolver and said, you know, back to your posts or else kind of thing. So order was resumed kind of thing. And from then, the attack carried on, but it started going dusk, and the few troops that were left, they got separated from the main regiment. The few troops that was left, including my dad, ended up going to a farm which was run by 2 French women. And early in the morning, they wanted water. My dad volunteered to go for water, and this is when he got shot. There was a hail of bullets came from the copse where the Germans were holding out, and one of the bullets hit him in the throat. And from there, he did come round. Obviously, it was quite a while after, and he was vomiting blood. And but at least he was alive, and they took him back to safety in a London bus again. And then eventually he ended up going into being transferred back to Blighty, and he ended up in Birkenhead. And the bullet was found by a matron about 3 weeks after. It had entered his left-hand side of his neck, missed his windpipe by a smidgen, and this matron, they didn't know where it had gone, the bullet, they couldn't find it, but this matron did some probing around and found it in the right-hand side of his neck, in his shoulder. So they dug it out then, obviously. And from there, that was it. It was a matter of slow progress coming round. He couldn't talk for 3 months, but it became a kind of a runner for the hospital, you know what I mean? They had a marquee to keep them kind of, putting entertainment on and so forth. But he used to do errands, and he took notes and things like that for them. And through wearing hospital blue, there was allowed free access to theatres, picture houses and so forth. And that was it. And while he was there, he met a doctor, a wealthy doctor, a Dr. Floyd, a GP, who had a panel of wealthy patients. Apparently he was very generous, and he used to give my dad and other soldiers, obviously, food and cigarettes. And he used to put the photographs of all the people he knew, all the soldiers he met, on his wall, his living room wall.
Right.
So he was eventually discharged and returned home wearing a cheap mob suit, and on his discharge certificate were the following words: being surplus to military requirements, having suffered impairment since entering into service, and he received 1 blue stripe for the wound inflicted. So that was it, basically.
Wow, that's quite a story, that, isn't it? That's amazing that he had that bullet in him for 3 weeks and they didn't find it.
They didn't find it until his mate and did some probing around and found it in his right shoulder, yeah.
And you obviously know a lot about his experience then, so did he talk to you about
well,
it later on?
reluctantly, I had to get it out of him, slowly but surely. Yes, he told me all about this, yeah. And when he got discharged, they gave him a pension of 7 shillings and 6pence a week, and he ended up on the dole, and he relinquished this pension for £10. That was it.
Right.
They sent me in better holding on with the £7, the 7 and 6pence a week, weren't they? You know, the years he lasted after, but they were short of money, so he relinquished it for a £10 payoff, and that was it.
And did he, I mean, you said he was on the dole afterwards, but did he manage to find work again?
Eventually he found work, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So did he suffer from that?
No, he never suffered. No, he never suffered. No, all he had was 2 marks, one where the bullet had entered, and the exit where they cut the bullet away, like, where they cut into the flesh to take the bullet out. Yeah.
Wow. And you said that he got a stripe for his...
Well, it's 1 blue stripe. The virtual, I think they put him on the lapel, I think, or something like that, It was a kind of a recognition of what he'd done, of his service. But I never saw anything, whether it threw it away, I don't know, in disgust. But I never saw any military medals, or anything like that. I never saw any of them, any campaign medals. I never saw any of that. But obviously we got the bullet to prove it, and all his papers.
And so obviously when you spoke to him about it, did you get a sense of how he felt about the experience?
No, it was just a matter of fact, really. It was over and done with. He was, it was just a matter of relating it to him. As I said, reluctantly, I managed to get out of it. I think I had kind of 2 sessions with him before I finally got it all right, of what it experienced.
And so thank you for telling me about him. We'll go through these photos in a minute. I was just wondering, do you know what well, it would have been your mum, wouldn't it? What your mum did during the war? Was she a bit younger, or?
Well, they weren't married or anything. They hadn't met then.
No,
but she did work on a farm. She worked at Lowall Farm. Well, I think the parents ran Lowall Farm at England. So she was a farm girl, really.
Right.
Up to meeting me dad.
And did she ever mention what it was like living through the war in this area?
No.
Okay, could you go through some of these photos then and tell us? So this is the bullet.
Yeah,
this
that's
is the
the
actual
bullet.
So did he get it done into that little box, or was that
No, I
you
did.
did?
Yeah, I had it done. All right.
Okay, can you tell us who everyone is in these
Well,
pictures,
this
then?
is me dad in 4 stages really, but I kind of decided, I think I've told you, to go into the pass forward, you know.
Yeah.
I thought he looked more vulnerable on that one. So that that's the one being used with the one with Dr. Floyd, which is that one. You know
And
what
this
I mean?
is the doctor that he met when he was recovering, and
That's
who
the
had
doctor,
the photos up
the
of
wealthy
everybody.
doctor, yeah.
Right.
And this looks as though, well, there were 2 probably taken in between going up to the front, you know what I mean, to do battle, so to speak. No, that looks like hospital blue to me.
Mm-hmm.
That would be after
After his injury.
After his injury. That would be before, and obviously that was before. I think that it'd be hospital blue as well, but the very last one. It will be the, you know, just before
he knows
gets...
he's going home in that one. He's
No,
got a smile on.
exactly, yeah.
And so is that?
Well,
that's
he looks
him
older
then?
anyway, doesn't he?
Yeah,
He looks
he does.
older in face.
Yeah. So that's.
It's just a friend.
Yeah.
I never knew who it was. He never said who it was, like,
Right.
you know. Or if he did, I never... I either weren't listening or I didn't recognise it.
And these are your grandparents?
That's my grandparents, obviously his mother and father, yeah. It's Richard Dakin and that's Margaret. Yeah.
Okay. And these documents here, so
Yeah.
we've got the office at Shrewsbury.
Yeah. That was where he did, excuse me, that's where they did the training at Shrewsbury, yeah.
Okay. So that says 1918 then, having been transferred Army Reserve on the 25th of 10th. Oh, maybe it's 16, it must be 16, must it?
Well, that, I think what this is, it's probably, that was when they put him on the reservist list.
Right, okay.
That's
So
the
later.
reservist.
Right.
That's after he'd done his war.
Right.
Everybody went, excuse me, everybody had to go on reserve, didn't they?
Right.
So that would be a reservist paper.
Okay.
Okay.
So he was lucky with
documents.
the timing there then, 'cause
Yeah.
that's only a month before.
Yeah.
And this one, protection and identity certificate.
An identity card, yeah. Identity certificate. Well, that is, well, it's just to say that all his details when he joined up, you know, Welsh Regiment, that's his number, not Dakin, but Dakin as regards, they had his name down. His height was, what was that? I
think
know.
that's his uniform.
That's it, yeah. Crosby. He did 170 days. Yeah. I think this will be his. I think this will be another kind of move on from when after he'd been wounded, because he'd done 170 days and then he was in the reserve on the 25th and the 18th. So that
matches
with
up
that,
with
isn't
this.
it?
Yeah.
And training reserve. So, but here is a description of the soldier who's been transferred to reserve. Born 1899, he's got a moles on his upper right arm and a scar on his left hand. Well, he worked in an
And a massive scar on his neck, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, they've not put that down, have they?
No.
But I think these are just physical scars of when he was taken in. You know, I think they have to put things down like.
So sorry, you were going to say...
his left hand, and that was done, I think, when he worked in an abattoir. And he cut his hand, it was there in his thumb with a knife, you know, when it was cutting up. And he was 5'7"3/4, fresh looking, brown eyes, dark brown hair, and he is entitled to wear one gold braid and a chevron, one blue. This will be after the his service, wasn't it? Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I think that is actually his discharge certificate. Okay. It's his number again, Thomas Dakin, private. Class, well, it's Welsh Regiment. Transferred.
Regiment or corps to which first posted?
Yeah, Welsh Regiment. And medals, class, I don't know, nil. So that's medals, class, decorations, mentioning dispatches, nil. So
I think you would have got something, wouldn't you?
you would, yeah. He's got one blue chevron for the actual service, as we've mentioned, and he's done 170 days service, nearly 81 days in the, I think that's the reserve, which they all have to do.
And it mentions there enlisted, that looks like Ashton underlined.
That's it, that's where he enlisted, Ashton underlined, yeah. 1899 again, 5 feet 7 3/4.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
My dad, Thomas Dakin, was born on the 24th of March 1899. His parents, Richard and Margaret, were illiterate water gypsies and worked on the Leeds to Liverpool Canal. They also lived in a boatman's cottage at Spencer's Bridge, Newborough, 7 miles from Wigan. With the advent of speedier road and rail transportation, canal work began to decline. So, with what possessions they owned, the whole family boarded their horse-drawn canal boat and came to Wigan. In desperation, Richard once led his faithful horse Jenny up the steps of a local pub and tried to sell it. On the 10th of May 1917, Dad enlisted to fight in the Great War. He had just turned 18. He was a private in the Welsh Fusiliers, and after a few months' training was shipped out to France. On their first day on foreign soil, the regiment was taken by London buses up to the front line. He and his company were detailed to flush out a company of German soldiers who were holed up in a small wood near the village of Histories. They managed to get within 300 yards of the copse, but the enemy, possessing heavy artillery, began an almighty bombardment. However, the British dug in and managed to hold their positions. In the fierce battle that followed, many British soldiers threw down their arms and began to retreat. The commanding officer drew his revolver and threatened to shoot anyone who refused to hold his position. Eventually, the troops returned to their post and order was restored. After another few yards advance, Dad and a few of his mates were pinned down again. This time they were trapped in a dip in a nearby field. For better protection, they dug shallow trenches with their bayonets. In the chaos which followed, they became separated from the rest of the party. As light began to fade, Dad and a few more managed to reach an isolated farm which was owned by 2 old women. The farm was already occupied by a squad of Welsh guards who were awaiting orders to attack the German Hellwood. Dad, who at one point was concealed behind a tree, managed to down a German soldier who was one of a group of trying to reach his comrades in the wood. Some time later, with supplies low, Dad volunteered to get water from a farmer's well. As he was crossing the yard, he was caught in a hail of bullets fired from the copse. A machine gun bullet entered his neck a few inches below his left ear, and down he went. The time was about 3 a.m. on Sunday the 13th of May, 1918. He was unconscious for some time and came to with blood pumping from his mouth and a shadowy figure kneeling over him. Later that morning, he was taken by a London bus with other wounded to safety behind the lines. He was shipped from France and hospitalised at Birkenhead, near Liverpool. The bullet, which was lodged in his right shoulder on the opposite side to where it had entered, was found 3 weeks later by a matron and removed. It had missed his windpipe by a mere fraction. They gave him the bullet as a memento of his brush with death. Because of his injuries, he couldn't speak for 3 months. Whilst recovering, he and other injured troops were entertained nightly in the large marquee. Dad met a soldier who was suffering from the effects of shell shock. He stole the man's army greatcoat to replace the one he had lost in France. Whilst recuperating, he met Dr. Floyd, a retired GP, who used to have a panel of wealthy patients. Apparently, he was a very generous man and supplied Dad and other wounded soldiers with food and cigarettes. He owned a big house and kept photographs of all the soldiers he had befriended on the walls of his living room. Dad would do errands for the hospital and the less fortunate, using local trams or walking. They, the wounded, were treated well. If they were wearing hospital blue, transport, cafes and theatres were all free. Dad was eventually discharged on January 14th, 1919. He returned home wearing a thin, cheap demob suit and a war pension of 7 shillings and 6pence a week, which, when he was on the dole, he relinquished for a lump sum of £10. On Dad's discharge certificate are the following words: being surplus to military requirements, having suffered impairment since the entry into service. He received 1 blue stripe for the wound infected. Dad died on 8th of March 1978 in Wigan Infirmary. Yeah.
Thank you for reading that. It's it's really, really interesting. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about your dad's story or your family story?
I don't think so, not really. It never affected his work or anything like that, or his health and so forth, you know. He just had this scar stuff kind of previously. He never talked about it, you know what I mean? As I say, I knew he had the bullet, and it came about one of my nieces, unknown to us. She took it, you know, which I only found out about later. And I was going to high school at the time, and I was asked to do essays on different things, you know. Bring something in, the teacher said, and we'll do an essay on what you bring in. And I thought of the bullet, you know, the dad. So when I went to ask my dad for it, he said, I'm not going to, where is it like? And he told me that my niece had it, so I got it back, so I kept it.
So you had this family heirloom.
Well, he never, you know, I know he had the bullet, we didn't go around saying, you know, he killed me off, like, you know, anything like that. He never bragged about anything like that, you know, he just said it took me all my time to get it out of him how much he'd done, you know, in the war. Although he didn't do all that much, but how close he'd been to death in the war, you know. So.
How do you feel about it? I mean, do you feel, a lot of the people that we've spoken to feel quite proud about their families?
Yes, I'm proud of it actually, yeah. I think it's something's left behind, you know, with the family, like, you know, something that's can go down this, isn't it, really, you know, basically.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and it's a personal connection to such a massive event in experience. So.
It's the centenary, isn't it? This next month, isn't it?
Yeah, August the 4th, I think. Yeah, it's coming up very soon. So that's why there's obviously a lot of extra interest this year and for the next 4 years. So thank you very much.
Okay.